Great, thank you very much. Indeed, partnerships, Dario, you said it, they need to be more strategic, more cross-cutting, more impactful. I think this is really what you are expecting. This is what ministers, when they were negotiating Horizon Europe, told us. They want a new way of preparing, shaping and implementing partnerships. And so this is very much what this session is about, that you help us in making these very many expected partnerships more impactful. Now, what I want to say in a few words is a little bit where we stand on that, because there's a bit of a track record which I think you need to be aware of, and then tell you maybe with one or two examples the ambition in terms of this strategic dimension and impact. So the first thing to say is that this discussion is now well grounded in at least 2 years of preparation. There was a lot of discussion, in particular between national administrations, including, of course, the Commission, also with existing partnerships, to note that the landscape of partnerships is amazing. It's 120 partnerships and more. I don't know them all. I must say I'm discovering some new ones every day. And there was a real case made by all of us that we needed to streamline this landscape, including to be more strategic and impactful. And so we will now, under Horizon Europe, I think you all know that, work on co-programmed partnerships, co-funded partnerships, and then the institutional partnership, if you want, in order of intensity in terms of the integration of resources. So that process is very important. It's not an end in itself, obviously not, but just the fact that we restructure it along these 3 types of partnerships obliges us, allows us to really revisit all the partnerships. And that's a process which is ongoing, and the strategic planning process, I think, is visibly particularly important for the partnerships. So the discussion is now in full swing. Kurt and his teams have identified with member states 44 partnerships. These are the ones which you saw in the strategic planning paper. And so on that basis, you are now suggesting quite a few more. So there's a bit of discussions ongoing in the Shadow Program Committee and in many parts of the Commission. And we will, in the next few months, including as an outcome of our co-design work, see which are the partnerships which we recommend to prioritize and roll out in the first phase of Horizon Europe. Now, I think what is really important to note is that we need to have different partnerships. I think the rolling over partnerships is not, I think, what we want, and I don't think this will work, including for those partnerships which have been amazing successes, and I could name so many of them. They are today already very powerful, they are today already very relevant, they are today already bringing many of you together, but at the same time, they are not necessarily inclusive enough. There are many other partners which I think need to be considered. They are in many cases not cross-cutting, because we didn't ask for cross-cutting partnerships in Horizon 2020. And I also think, and I will give you one example, that they are not necessarily disruptive enough. And I think what Horizon Europe is about changing and providing these solutions for our transformations. We've been discussing that now for 2 days, so I don't go into the content of it, but partnerships alongside missions and collaborative research need really to make a difference. So we will push our partners and ourselves into much more disruptive, impactful partnerships. And I will give you one example because I've done it publicly now several times, and it's an example which is very important and very dear to me, which is the Clean Sky partnership, which is frankly a spectacular partnership. It's one of engineering prowess of a scale which I think not many can imagine. What is happening in this partnership in terms of our aeronautics is simply amazing. The point is that these outcomes are also irrelevant, because the efficiency gains are 6, 7, 8, 9%, which is extraordinary when you think of an aeronautics system of today and working from it. It's really amazing, but it's not going to make the difference. So we now need to discuss, and it's of course a discussion which is in full swing with all our partners in member states, in research organizations and in the industry, how we shape this partnership to genuinely make a difference and make aviation relevant in this climate transition. Where we will end, I don't know. I don't think they know either, but that's a type of work which is now ongoing, and which this session, I think, needs to feed into. You need to tell us what the partnerships can deliver, and we will then try to do that. Good, thank you very much. And back to you, Daira and Kurt.
Thank you so much, and I can only remind us all the importance that we now heard. We need partnerships to be more strategic, they must be more inclusive, because they need also to be much, much more transformative. We understand that we are the generation that have the last opportunity, but also the first knowledge and possibility to transform every value chain, every city, every consumption pattern into something sustainable. And the reason why we must do that is not to save the planet, because the planet will recover without us, but it's actually our obligation for our children and for our grandchildren and for human society to prosper. And that's why I'm very, very pleased that we now have a highly esteemed panel full of experienced people with insights and ideas of how to make this happen. So please join me here on stage. And while you all come and sit, I'll just remind us all that this session is designed to help us understand and discuss the potential and the expectations then on partnerships. How can they become these drivers of the transformation we need? So here I have a number of panelists with me. Thomas Boch, you're the Director General at the Ministry of Education, Science and Sports in Slovenia. I understand that you're already collaborating with 3 EIT KICs, and also with the Bio-Based Industries Joint Undertaking, so you have quite some experience there. Corinne de Vries, you're head of the Office for Science, over there you are. You're the head of Office for Science and Innovation Support at IMA, and you're also serving on the scientific committee of the Innovative Medicines Initiative. Welcome. And now, Una McNerney, you're the CEO of an exciting company called Iris Technology Solutions. You're an advanced engineering company specialized in photonics and ICT-based processes. I have to say, I looked through some of your cases on your website, and it's a very inspiring and encouraging read. And Alice Viefos, you're the director of the Cabinet Office at the DG for Energy and Climate Change in France, at the Ministry for Ecological and Inclusive Transition, which pretty much sums up what we want to happen here. So together, you can tell us about the need for partnerships from a national perspective, from an industrial perspective, from SME perspective, and it's going to be an honor to listen to what you have to say. So let me start with you. I'll just sit down as well, but struggling to see you all. Thomas, if you would tell us a little bit about what are the long-term expectations of real systemic change in your country regarding to circular economy? How do you see that?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank for invitation and to actually opportunity to discuss and to talk here about our experiences and needs for collaboration in partnerships. First of all, I would like to start with one important issue that I'm coming from the Ministry of Education, Science and Sport. And circular economy is obviously not the key topic of our ministry. But nevertheless, actually, even because of that, it's important that we, as responsible for research, could actually play as an enabler of the processes. So circular economy is one of the fields where the values, the ideas, and actually already implemented actions are in the different ministries, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of Economic Development, and so. And actually, due to the fact that we have quite a strong collaboration with some EU institutions, with Joint Research Center, with KIC Climate, with KIC Raw Materials, actually we somehow created a platform for collaboration in the field of circular economy. So it means that we put together, from a national perspective, different players already dealing with a circular economy from different perspectives, from different, actually with different portfolios, with different activities and budgets, but still actually in the same area. So actually we used this international platform of KICs and Joint Research Center to somehow harmonize the European level with the domestic priorities, while the circular economy is also one of the priorities, key priorities of our governmental strategies, and actually made a framework for working together, as I said, for harmonizing priorities. I would also say for putting together all the resources we have in different ministries. And what's also important to say, actually we used the already existing instruments and already existing platforms and also funding opportunities which are in a different places, including the EU level, actually to do the same thing in the one field of circular economy. So it's a quite interesting journey. We are preparing the action plan for the next years, and hopefully and it looks so, we'll have a strong political support to do so in the national level, and we also believe it will be quite an important showcase for collaboration with EU partnerships as well.
That's quite fantastic. So what I hear is that the partnerships have actually helped you accomplish something we talk quite a lot about, the need to get this cross-sector also in government to work together.
Yes, I would say exactly this is the case. And I would say the circular economy is very, very appropriate for that. While we are all aware about the necessity of action, we all do some separate activities in different ministries or different places, and it's a showcase to try to engage the other ministries, other institutions, and probably it's one of the topics where it's not easy, but still probably one of the places where it is possible to achieve a long-term commitment of different stakeholders, especially political ones, to support the process.
And how would you explain, that sounds fantastic, so if you would explain the complementarity as well, if this helps with a cross perspective in your government, how would you explain the complementarity of the partnerships to your national plans? If you would just...
Well, the complementarity, I would say that partnerships, we heard for several times that it should deliver, it should be useful, it should be designed to help to actually to achieve the goals we have. And actually, in this respect, the implementation of the goals and also the missions which partnerships in this field have will be on the national level. It's impossible to implement the activities of partnerships without collaboration with the national authorities. And so I would say it's a win-win situation for all of us. We are actually implementing our goals, and partnerships as a strategic part are actually connecting together different levels and actually deliver the real results. And I would say it's one of the stories which I hope and I fully believe will be a success story in the future.
I imagine the entire audience will want to study that case later. So Alice Veifos, you also have a national perspective. So what are the long-term expectations for systemic change in your country if you look at energy and ecological transition, and if you would make a similar reflection on the connection to the partnerships, what would that be?
So of course on the global change today is so happening fast that we have to act, and we have set quite ambitious targets and a lot of different tools. We have tried a lot of different things, but today we see that it's not enough and that we have to go further. We have two main targets to reach. The first one is to reduce our consumption, which is really a challenge in itself. The second one is to decarbonize the economy. For 15 years now, we have set a lot of ambitious targets and the different tools. And we have worked quite a lot on innovation as well, because innovation was seen as the savior of everything for global warming. We thought that with technology, we would find the perfect solutions to all our problems. However, today we see that even though we have put quite a lot of efforts and we have had a lot of really interesting demonstrators all over Europe, we see a lot of technologies, However, things are not really happening. We do not see in our day-to-day life a massive change, and we haven't yet achieved all of our targets. Of course, we have seen a lot of efforts, and we've reached quite significant progress, and we can be proud of. And I think that we have reached those very interesting progress thanks to all the cooperations that we have done, and with the different roadmaps that we have set. For example, in energy, we have the SET plan, which has set very clear technology roadmaps. We have had partnerships such as FCHEU on hydrogen, for example, that have also given us impressive hydrogen cars and hydrogen train in Europe, and we can be proud of. But today we haven't had European champions, industrial champions, and we do not have PV panel producers, for example. And I think for what misses is a bit a link between all our great researchers that found really impressive technologies and how to implement it and to have a massive scale-up. So our expectation now is, in France, we have set the neutrality of carbon by 2050. And in order to reach it, we really have to achieve a massive scale-up of all different technologies and all different usages. And in order to do so, we really have to work together. And when I say we, it's not only European member state or local authorities, it's the industry and the citizens. We really have to work better together in order to succeed the scale-up of all the different technologies and innovations.
So, as we understand, we have the supply side is not enough. Research and innovation providing us with technology. We have a lot, but it's not enough to really make that happen, is what I'm hearing you say. But if you would elaborate a little bit more also then on, when we're here to discuss the partnerships, what qualities in the partnerships are really needed then to get that type of, what should I say, implementation at scale or actual transformation to happen? You say we need to work together. What's your reflection on what that implies for partnerships?
For partnerships, obviously, I think one of the key interests is that it puts together public and private, and these are the links that we have to strengthen. It means that we have, of course, to work on all together to find the right solution, to set the roadmaps, and then to ensure that the implementation is there. Because it's not only to have a nice demonstrator where politicians can go and say, oh, look, it's incredible, we have one hydrogen car that exists, but how do we ensure that we have decarbonized transport everywhere? And so this is where we need the intelligence of everyone and the know-how and the competencies in order to set the different roadmaps on all the different topics. And I think that's what is really interesting in the partnerships is that it covers a wide range of all the main challenges we have to achieve. And therefore, it will really help us, I think, to be partners all together, partner between public, partner with the private sector, and also involve the usage that we can have on all the different topics.
So implementation is a stronger part of the partnerships as well, even from the beginning, and an important focus. Then I'm looking at you, Corinne, also, because then I associate to the public side of the partnerships. And you work for the EMA, a very important policy body. And why have you chosen to engage in the Innovative Medicine initiative, and your reflections on where we're going next?
Thank you. Can I just check, can people hear me in the audience? Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. So what Alice has just said really rings a bell, because although I work in a different sector, some of those messages are very similar. The European Medicines Agency decided to collaborate in IMI, but also to develop other initiatives to support innovation. And the establishment of the Science and Innovation Support Office is one of those, because we really recognize that we can't just sit in our ivory tower and wait for the innovation to be brought to us for assessment, because that's just not how it happens. So there was a two-way stream really needed in our view. That's A, we need to drag the innovation into the regulatory space to make sure that it benefits patients better than it currently does. I come from academia originally, 20 years in academia, and so I know from that side as well the frustration of, we've done all this wonderful innovation, why aren't they applying it throughout the world? And then now being in the regulatory space, also being aware that, but in academia, you don't necessarily understand that that had the perspective that regulators take on medicines innovation. So in IMI, I sit on the scientific committee, and in that role, I provide input into the strategic research agenda, as well as I'm in the dialogue with the state representative groups to help a mutual understanding of how can we get a better engagement across Europe in this innovative medicines research. What are the hurdles? If you think about medicines innovation in particular, some of that is legislated at national level, and some of it is legislated at European level, and especially in the innovations that we see these days, that can be a challenge because sometimes it's not clear where something sits. And we also provide input in very granular, just in the call text. If you're going to develop a call text in this area, please be aware of ongoing initiatives already, so we can help ensure synergy, we can help avoid duplication, we can also input what we see in terms of hurdles in innovation in certain areas. That we think, if you're going to research this, then please take this on board as well. So all of that with an aim to help synergy, to help ensure innovative medicines reach patients, the right innovative medicines are being developed, and so on. And of course, with that experience, now looking forward to Horizon Europe, there are these questions of, but sometimes you still think it can be more ambitious. There are developments that you think it shouldn't. It's not just about medicines. So there are opportunities thinking, and I'll give two examples. One is what we call big data, which is a toxic concept perhaps, but if you think health, it's not just medicines, it's healthy lifestyle, fetal programming, and that then immediately makes me think, now sitting in the European system, Environment Agency, Food Agency, it's much broader. And so in IA China, Innovative Health Initiative, it's great to see that many more directorates are involved, and you can see the ambition. And the recognition it's broader. And I think we'll come on to it later in the discussion as well. So I'll probably stop there. But thank you for having us here, because we would really like to help shape that strategic research agenda for Horizon Europe.
Yeah, and I would love also to hear more about this, the speed in which the urgency we have established, but then the opportunities of increased speed through the partnerships. That would be super interesting to hear. And also the role of then regulatory bodies, because there's this challenge of the national versus EU level that you mentioned. So we'll get back to that. Una McNerney, you are the CEO of one of these companies that help infuse the speed and the innovation into various ecosystems. Could you just tell us a bit about, from your perspective, why your company decided to participate in the SPIRE partnerships and your experiences from there?
Okay. So you can hear me? Yeah. Okay. No, first of all, I'm really happy to be here. I think in representation of SMEs in Europe. I think the fact that I'm actually on a panel of 4 shows the big relevance that SMEs can have in the partnerships and the role that we can play. And I'd just like to share with you, from a practical context, our experience. So we got involved in SPIRE, which was the public-private partnership of the European process industries. We got involved very early at the beginning of Horizon 2020, And we got involved essentially because we spotted some call topics that were very aligned with a development roadmap that we had. So as a technology provider, we could see that we could respond very well to a number of the first calls in Horizon 2020. And it just so happened that those calls were from the Spire roadmap. So those calls directed us to the Spire roadmap, and we sat down and we went through it. And really, from a technology SME's perspective, to have access to a consolidated document that clearly defines the roadmap of a major part of European industries, so the European process industries, that's really invaluable information for us to have as a business. And I think anyone in business will know that one of the key challenges is trying to understand market needs, to understand industry needs. So that for us was a massive value. We thought, okay, here's a very clearly defined roadmap. And we sat down and we went through that roadmap and we started to match with our key enabling technologies. How can we respond to these challenges? And then we decided we'd actually join Spire because we looked at the member base, and there's such a wealth of community in terms of the value chain of actors, from the blue chips from the European process industries, major actors from the academic community, other SMEs. So we thought this is a very good opportunity for us as an SME to get involved. And so we joined Spire, and we, as an SME, decided we were going to take on the leadership of 3 proposals into the first 3 topics that we thought were very much aligned with our business strategy. So we invited in a synergistic consortium of a value chain of actors that would be hugely beneficial for us. We drove those proposals forward and we won the 3 of them. So I think it showed as well the leadership that an SME can have, the opportunity that's there for us to lead our roadmap in tune with a wider roadmap, if you will. And that was the start of our participation in Spire. I think you need to invest time then. As an SME, you need to invest time in these partnerships. You need to be committed and you need to see the opportunity. And I think that would be a big message for other SMEs, is there is a strategic reason to be involved in these partnerships. And once you do get involved, you have to make it work. So you have to put in the time and you have to kind of embrace that involvement. But for us, it has been very, very positive. I think I'm very much aligned with what Alice said. We need to start to look, okay, how can we do more? Because it's not about developing it is about developing new technologies and getting new knowledge, etc. But that's not the end point. The end point is we need to start to see the results being used in industry for the impact to happen. And we have to avoid a scenario whereby post-funding, the consortiums disband, the demonstrators are there, they're lovely to look at. We need to start to see how business is actually made from these results. And I think that's something we can talk about later on in the panel, but I think that's the opportunity that we need to start to get adoption and implementation of the results that are coming out of these projects.
So a common theme seems to be the impatience also of actually getting the implementation to speed up and how we can work with that. If I turn to you again then, the Horizon Europe is actually has put a big focus also on rationalization and reforming of the portfolio. You've been around for a while. What is your perception, Thomas? Has there been enough reform and rationalization in this proposed portfolio?
Yeah, well, I believe that my mic doesn't work, so I'll use this one. First of all, I would say that, as already mentioned at the beginning by Jean-Éric, actually before there was quite a number of different partnerships, and there is quite a jungle of different initiatives. For sure, it's very promising that at the moment there is a rationalization, or let's say reform, to a much more focused and fewer of these partnerships. But I would say at that point that we should ask ourselves whether the question of rationalization and the reduction of a number of partnerships is the right question. I think we should first of all answer answer to the question whether the initiatives which are on the table are working, are transparent, are delivering the results. If they are all doing so, then the rationalization is okay. If actually we miss some of them which could also deliver and be transparent and so on, so we reduced too much. And if there are some of them which are actually not in line with these goals and with the intentions, so the rationalization is not completed. And I would say that as far as you ask me, it is important to actually somehow put together similar initiatives, actually rethink some of them, put them together, but still I think that the right and the most important question is whether are they transparent or are they deliver the results. And I think that the process is promising. It's not finished yet, but I think that we are in a good way to do a good job in this respect.
So we're acknowledging the need to actually reform and look into them, but they have to, that work has to continue. If I turn to you, Alice, what do you think in relation for the priorities of the future partnerships? Are they, in relation to what we just heard also, are they ambitious enough? Are they clear enough?
On my subjects, I think that partnerships cover a wide range of usage and energies. So I think it's a good mix to have in order to ensure to reach the right markets. Now I think one of the real challenge, we have the topics, but now we have to ensure that those topics are really cared about, and what are we going to do with those topics. And I think one of the main tasks of the partnerships will be either for the ones that were already existing to carry on doing the great things they were doing up to now and go to the next step, and for the new ones to build concrete and deliverable actions to ensure that they meet the targets. And in order to do so we have also, of course, to pursue the technological challenges, but we have also to fight for the innovation, social innovation, and for organizational innovation. And I think that those are type of innovations that we have not dealt with a lot up to now, and that we really have to strengthen in all the different topics.
I have to note also, I'm happy to see questions running in here on Slido, and we can see them on the screen. And we only have a few more minutes, so questions to the panel, and after that, I hope to open up the floor also to you in the audience. So keep writing questions on Slido, and we'll get to those in a minute. But in relation then to sort of this organizational innovation, then I'm associating again to, you know, the policy and the role of regulatory bodies and the ones who can actually have an impact also on the implementation and demand side. Corinne, if you would elaborate now further on where we left off last, how can the partnerships now really drive this kind of transformation based on health in the health area, for example? What would be different, if you would tell us a bit about your thoughts on that, the organizational part and the implementation part, what is needed?
Okay, thank you. So I think, again, along with Alice, this is a responsibility for all. So, for example, you've said earlier in this discussion, you know, the supply side is not enough. I would argue, actually, the supply side should not drive the agenda. And Una, it also relates to what you said of, oh, you know, the business needs to be made of it. Well, actually, so from the outset, we need to think, where is it that we want to be? And that should drive the agenda. And for that to then have a real impact and have a, you know, that's the ambition with Horizon Europe, more impact. It means that all the partners have to sign up to that ultimate target from the outset. And that also means that everybody has to be prepared to embrace the results of this research innovation that's happening, and be prepared to implement any changes that may be required. And this may seem super vague, So I'm going to give, one or two examples, and those are what we see. So we say to any Horizon 2020 funded partnership, we will invite you to come to our offices for a meeting with EMA staff and representatives, the relevant representatives and experts from the member states and the network and academia and our scientific committees as relevant, to have a dialogue with you to help understand how better to ensure that what you are developing will reach marketing authorization, will be acceptable at European level. And in those discussions, we increasingly find, because of the nature of the innovation, that the current legislation is not actually designed for the medicines that are being developed. And so, for example, if I have a product that is being given to a patient by extracting the blood from the patient, the product is put in the erythrocyte, in the red blood cell, and then it's being put back into the patients. We have questions: is this a transplant or is it a medicine? What is the manufacturing site? All these sort of questions. And those are questions that are decided at national level, not at European level. But the actual type of products that are being developed are so specialized that they don't benefit sufficient numbers of patients in one member state necessarily to be actually commercially interesting. But we do want them developed, and it may be that there's cross-sectional learnings to be had from it. So everybody wants this to happen, and then you can't just sit in your lab in academia and develop it without thinking, how is this? How am I going to make sure that this is actually being acceptable in patients in healthcare settings and so on. Likewise, we can't sit on our ivory tower, know vaguely that this is happening, and think, well, we'll deal with it when it arrives on our desks. So that is something that I think in Horizon Europe, if that can be really implemented in the design of the program, it will be that will be game-changing. That would be brilliant. So everybody, all the partners, have to go in eyes wide open and committed from the outset. And so my question with the current is, no matter how ambitious it may seem at the moment, is it ambitious enough? Because IHI is put in the health cluster, but I actually think, health, climate has an impact on health, mobility has an impact on health, the digital space, yes, there are opportunities elsewhere, but there's a massive opportunities for digital health. Artificial intelligence can be applied to health questions and so on. So I think last sentence then is that we have to stop tackling new problems with old solutions, but we have to start tackling old problems with new solutions in this program, please.
Thank you. And I'm just, you are saying so many things that resonate with me, also in relation to what happens on the national level. Because what you're saying implies a very strong commitment from the national level to actually step in, and also, as to your point, there are regulatory bodies on the national level that will need to be engaged, committed, and act in order for the real changes to happen. So just to get a reflection for you, then Alice, also who has a similar position in the national system, what is necessary to ensure a stronger commitment from member states in these future partnerships, and also get to more of this complementarity between what happens at the EU level and in the partnerships, and then on the ground in the member state?
I would really like to have the perfect recipe, because I think that it's a question that a lot of us ask ourselves. I can give you an example of a successful thing we did just at the national level, but even between ministries in France, we don't always take the time to talk between each other. And of course, there is a lot of link between the different ministries. There is climate change, but there is the industry, there is the economy, there is, of course, research and innovation, and the health also has links. So we have a lot of different ministries. And we have had an investment plan that decided that for all the main innovations that had to happen, we would decide on the projects that we would support, and we would do it with all the ministry around the table. And it was the first time that actually we had like pocket money that we had to decide all together. And we tried to do it not saying, oh, you're the industry, so you will support the industrial project that we have, and you're the innovation, so you will support the public lab. But we would really try, and we are trying every week that we see each other, to really work together to see what's the best and what we can do with our public labs, with our industries, with the citizen. And I think with the partnerships, we have to create between the European level and the member state level the rights involvement. People have to feel involved in order to want to go to Brussels, because we have to take the plane, and even for French people it's easier, but I know that for some other country it's quite a challenge. And so we have to want to take the time, and we have to see also the value of it. And sometimes the value can be money, but it can also be other things that are very important to structure, and we need the European level as well. So I think the partnership will really be a success when we will have find ways to make a win-win approach between all the member states and the stakeholders to ensure that the time we spend in meetings or reading the emails will be worth it.
And I think that's also to your point of your experiences in using these partnerships to get across departments and national level and get real engagement, Thomas. And I want to get back to you also in a bit, but Kurt, please join us. Because we don't want to miss the opportunity of also engaging with the audience and listening to the reflections you made during this discussion and the questions that are here. So I'll give the power to you for a bit and see if you can choose a question or maybe
Thank you.
See people in
Thank you, Daria. That's a lot of power. Thank you to the panel members. We heard so much. We'll have so much to do to process everything you give to us. I think one of the messages I get is that we do not necessarily want more partnerships, but we want more from the partnership. Let me turn to the audience. We are receiving very good questions and comments on Slido. The Commission colleagues will have a lot of time necessary to handle all these questions. I can assure you that we take note of everything, and we will discuss everything between all the Commission services, because I hope you have noticed that these R&I days are not just DG research and innovation, but we have colleagues from all relevant Commission services here in the room, and I would like to thank my colleagues for being here. Can I turn to you and see if there are questions, comments from you in the audience? The idea is not that you promote your partnership or that you make publicity for your partnership, but that you help us understand what are concerns and especially what can we do to make sure that the partnerships deliver better and quicker. And I see a gentleman over there. Please keep it short, Twitter-like, if you like.
Twitter-like, okay, I'll try that. My name is Gosse Fuik, I work for TNO, Dutch Public RTO, and I want to go into something that Onak, if I say the name correctly, sorry, said that for her company actually having a consolidated research and innovation agenda ready from a consolidated European industry is actually very helpful. And I was wondering, for us, we always say the main reason to participate in a partnership is exactly to sit together with partners, define a innovation agenda and to move along that together. So I was wondering if maybe the other panelists would also like to reflect on the importance of actually getting a agenda ready that everybody is really committed to, and not people just shoving in their priorities, but really having a long-term agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Daria, if you agree, I will collect a few comments and questions and then turn back to you to interact with the panel. Anyone else who wants to come in? Yes, please.
Well, I'm Jean-Paul Moati. I'm the CEO of a Institut de Recherche pour le Développement, and I'm a member of an independent group of scientists who just presented yesterday at the UN General Assembly the first Global Sustainable Development Report. In this report, we say two things. The first thing is that a research priority should be explicitly given to sustainability science, and that the SDGs should become the explicit reference framework for research. And the first question is, to what extent the EU is going to do that? The second thing is that, of course, we say that public-private partnerships are key because we need trillions of dollars and euros to do the shift towards sustainable development. But the problem is on what criterion? How can we guarantee that the public-private partnership we are building around research, and not only around research, are going in the direction not of fossil fuels, for example, not of infrastructure that destroys the planet, not on the current model of food systems which are totally non-sustainable, but go in the good direction.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul. Anyone else who wants to come in? Yes, please.
Yes, Victoria from COI. We are doing the practical work for the European Commission. We are communicating about Horizon 2020 calls and also about the partnerships. And our experiences is that in the many, many years where we discuss partnerships with our stakeholders, that especially for the academic community, the role for the academic community within partnerships is very often not clear enough. So I would just make the recommendation also to the partnerships here in the room to make it very clear on your website, but also in your communication strategy. What is the role for academia here? What can they do? Can they apply only for calls? Or can they also determine with you the research agenda for the next years to get together with industry? Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Very good questions and comments coming in. 2 or 3 more, if I may. Anyone else who wants to come in? There. Yes, Edith, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Kurt. My name is Edith Herzog, and I represent the 2 organizations, GEANT and RDA. And I'd like to ask from the partnerships that what do they think about beyond the work plan? Because the work plan is a very important element of the cooperation, but we are talking about far more. We have to combine our data, we have to combine our data set, we have to combine our virtual cooperation and collaboration. So how do you see the European Open Science Cloud and the verification process in the partnership? Because I think that it's it's an underlying infrastructure, if you wish, for all the partnerships, but it should be a priority of the partnership and not something took it as a granted from one side and took it as an additional toolkit. Digitization of the partnership must be a top priority for all European partnerships. So it may be a comment, but it's also a question. Thank you.
Very good, a very important dimension indeed. Anyone else? Yes, please. Gentleman over here.
Yes, good afternoon. So my name is Christian Leroy. I'm from European Aluminium. My question is about the skills, because I guess there is a need for new skills, and I'm wondering if there is a role for these partnerships to address the needs of new skills if you have disruptive technologies, for example, for the market. I don't know if it will be, let's say, to some extent addressed in this partnership.
Thank you very much. Daria, over to you.
Yes, thank you. That was many very interesting questions. So I'm going to let all of the panelists pick and choose from the questions that we heard, actually. But I think I'll start with turning to you, Una, because one of the things that came up was really how do we ensure that the partnerships are working for the SDGs and are really a driver? So my question to you in reflection on that, what's your reflection? How do we make sure that the partnerships are equipped so that it drives the transformation of companies to the actual sustainable circular economy and everything that we really need them to transform into?
Okay. So I think maybe just to kind of start on that roadmap issue, I think there's a lot of co-design that goes into the roadmap. I think there's an awful lot of involvement from the partners in shaping the roadmap. Now, we weren't involved in the first roadmap because we came in late. But I know now, moving forward into shaping the roadmap for 2050, there is a big dynamic in co-design and co-creation of that roadmap. So I think that's important. And I think the vision, so that the partnership puts forward the vision as to what's the world going to look like at the end of this partnership. I think that's that's a great starting point, that this is the vision that we're working towards, and here's the roadmap that's going to get us there. Where the opportunity lies, I think, going forward now into Horizon Europe is what are the other softer sides, not beyond the research and innovation, so let's say the non-technological levers, what do they need to be to get us to the implementation, to get the adoption and the use of all the really valuable and relevant results that are coming out of these projects. I think a lot of it has to be with the consortium, so we have to understand that we now have to move into a mindset whereby we're developing demonstrators, we need KPIs around those demonstrators, we need to be able to convince decision makers and inspire decision makers from the community of buyers, to my mind, that exists in these partnerships. So as a technology SME, we see the blue chip organizations in the partnership as potential customers of ours one day. And if that happens, then we have implementation, we have adoption, because someone is actually buying and using the technologies that we're developing. And what kind of mechanisms could be used, or what kind of methods or additional actions could be in the partnerships? Now, it's to look at, let's say, assistance in business model design, let's say the new business models, when we talk around the circular economy, we have to look across the other partnerships and think, what kind of engagement do we need to be having with the actors in other partnerships that might be relevant along the value chain, especially when we look at things like circular economy. How do we get key decision makers out of their offices and right in front of demonstrators? More activities like that, whereby we're really showcasing the results to decision makers, and really facilitating an uptake and an adoption. And the de-risking. It's really important for industry that we de-risk the innovations, that it becomes less of a risk for industry to take on and adopt a new technology. So I think from our side, it's to probably see more of those non-technological enablers happening in the partnerships. And I think we all, as stakeholders in the partnerships, have a role to play in suggesting and thinking, okay, what does the new partnership need to look like to get to impact? And to bring our expertise and our experience from the business world as well into the partnerships.
Now,
okay.
Thank you very much. And I want to defend all of your time also to make a closing remark. So we don't have much time for this, but we also heard a question related to it would be responsible to do anything else, but how do we know that we're putting money into the research and innovation that is really addressing the SDGs? We heard questions related to combining data and the open science cloud. I'm just opening the floor. Who wants to go first?
Actually, I would like to combine a few questions. First of all, I absolutely agree that it's important to follow SDGs goals and so on. And actually, I would say the part of the answer to this question is to include appropriately academic sphere researchers and not only those who are coming from natural sciences and engineering, while usually when talking about the new products, the transfer of knowledge and so on, we quite often forget the importance of social sciences and humanities. And with this respect, I believe we should in all of the partnerships include also the societal dimension, the dimension which is domain of social scientists and people from humanities. And actually, if these partners will be open enough and the vision will be built within the broad community of different stakeholders, I believe that at the end the result will be as we would like to have it.
Thank you. And then I think if I turn to you, Corinne, and then we take a last round also of your final remarks. But if you would like to address some of the questions we heard, and then also give you the chance to say, if you finalize with one message to the representatives here of partnerships and the Commission, what would that be?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I thought I wasn't going to be allowed to do this. Great. I would like to go into the question about the public-private partnership and how you can ensure that these partnerships don't just that they actually follow the recommendations from the report to the UN, as opposed to the business model that needs to work. So to me, co-design is absolutely crucial, but we need to be so careful because it mustn't be the business model, the supply side, that drives what is being developed. So in IMI, we actually work quite hard on setting criteria for, okay, so what is a real good candidate for public-private partnership funding? And key to that has to be, of course, there has to be something in it for the commercial partners, but the driving force from our perspective needs to be what is actually the requirements for the European population. And so Angela Merkel, when she talked to in her Harvard address, she said, are we letting technology decide what we can and can't do, or are we demanding from technology what it actually is we need? And I think, both things can benefit public and commercial. And I think that is something to really focus on. But I think we really have to be super bold in how we design these frameworks and think much beyond, much more outside the box than is currently happening. So would you like me to do my closing remark now or later?
Yes, please.
Yes?
Send your statement and then we'll have everybody do the same.
So I would say that for maximum input, we really need to ensure that we agree on the common agenda, which is, has been mentioned here. But we must make sure that everybody buys into that from the outset, and that is worth investing time and energy in. But we have to have this clear vision from the outset and think completely novel. So medicines are there to treat diseases. Can we actually change our systems so that you don't need medicines for these diseases anymore, and you can actually free up resources to design and pay for medicines in areas where they're much more needed and other areas can be prevented, for example. So there's a design issue. Partners have to buy in from the outset, and then throughout, from the design and then throughout the research and innovation happening, has to be built in a continuous dialogue to ensure that when the research and innovation has happened, actually the systems are ready to embrace that. And as EMA, we love to be on a strategic research agenda so we can make sure that the health agenda is heard from the outset. And we love to work together with the other agencies under the European Union to make sure that there's mutual benefit. For example, health is not just medicines, it's also, fetal programming going into the third generation of exposures in utero and so on.
Thank you. Alice, what would be your key message to the people in the room, if you would have one last thing?
My key message, Corinne mentioned, we have to think one step ahead. It means the innovations we are doing have to be implemented at some point. So think also how to implement them and develop innovations that people want to use. Therefore, in order to live in a better world and not just in a technological world.
Una.
Okay. Hello? Oh. So I think it's important to emphasize that technology is not the driver. Technology is the enabler. I think the driver is the challenge. It's that vision that we spoke about. It's what the world is going to look like thanks to the 7 years after our partnership. Okay, so we can see that as the end point. And technology steps in as a very, very powerful enabler, not the only enabler. And to ensure that the partnerships are successful, we need those non-technological enablers as well. So that's the key message from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas.
Well, I will add something from the governmental, or let's say national point of view. I think that the key element for success, for future success of partnerships is appropriate engagement of authorities, public authorities. And I believe that for to achieve this, it is extremely important that the procedures and all the activities of the partnerships are as transparent as possible, that in all of them the key performing indicators are somehow followed, and that the partnerships are opened as much as possible. And when these preconditions will be fulfilled, I believe that also for many of us, it will be much easier to somehow get the other ministries, the other stakeholders from the national states around the table and support the partnerships.
Thank you very, very much. Rather than attempting to summarizing all of the key points, I'm going to turn over to you, Kurt. What are your reflections on what we just heard?
Thank you, Daria, and thank you, panel members. I will not give my reflections because the Commission is here today to listen to you. But I will ask someone else to give reflections, and I would like to invite up to the podium Luc Zoete, Professor Zoete, who was formerly the rector of the Maastricht University. Luc is not only a seasoned authoritative scholar in innovation policy and innovation management, but he's also been very active over many, many years in advising governments and the European Commission on innovation and science policy. He was president of the RISE group of experts that advised Commissioner Moedas. And very importantly, Luc was in the famous informal council meeting in Tallinn in July 2017. I will never forget that experience because all ministers rounded up to say, what is happening with all these partnerships? We don't understand it anymore. There is too much of it. Please do something about these partnerships. Look, you were there in that room.
Kurt.
Are we...
In this ballot that we didn't rehearse so many times, can I then suggest something?
Please, Daria.
To do something together, a warm applause, welcoming Luc and thanking our panel.
Very good. That was the right thing to do indeed, Daria. Look, you were at that famous informal council meeting. With what you have seen over the last 2 years, with what you have heard this afternoon, are we responding to what the ministers asked? Are we on the right track?
Well, before answering that question, let me respond to the biggest difference with Tallinn 2 years ago, is that in Tallinn we had a panel, and it was a manel, if Maria Reinfeldt remembers. It was an all-male panel. And I would say the difference of 2 years is now pretty striking, that we at least have a much more equalized panel, and it shows the importance of inclusiveness in all senses, also from the gender perspective. And I think in terms of partnerships, this is a major improvement. That would be my first comment. Now, with respect to what if you look at the way the framework programs have evolved over time, and at that time we had the midterm evaluation of Horizon 2020. And of course, what is striking at that time is that continuously new instruments have been added to each of the framework programs. And when you evaluate each of these programs separately, each of these instruments, you don't get the tremendous complexity which has increased. And I mean, lots of the points which were raised here, also by our friends on the Slido side, highlight that at a certain level, you have so many instruments, you have so many partnerships, there is such a complexity in the system that actually it is like a Christmas tree full of different features. And the advantages of having that many partnerships starts really to have decreasing returns. And I think this was the issue which was raised by many policymakers, that is that, there should be somewhere a rationing. And the main problem with this is, of course, that the need for partnership is very different from discipline, subject to subject. In the health sector, I think the examples which Corinne de Vries gave about EMA, etc., you really see a tremendous complexity with difference between member states in terms of the insurance schemes, the way the health regulation operates, and above it, the EMA and the European research program. So these are all areas of what we call shared parallel competences between the Commission and the member states in very different topics, in very different areas. And in some areas, partnerships can be very small. It can be very limited in terms of more interactions with a couple of agents across Europe. In other areas, you need to involve them all. So I think this is a difficulty which I find, if I compare it, to come now finally to your question, if I compare it with what happened today, and I think for me it's striking that maybe it's the Commission itself who has given the example. You have started with partnerships from DG RTD to the other DGs, as it was mentioned here, and Jean-Éric Paquet mentioned it. I think to some extent that might well be the secret, is that you get out of your comfort zone of research agent and the funding of research and innovation, etc., into the impact on health, DG Santé, in regional development, in growth, etc. And so you have to involve those other partners at the level here of the Commission, of other DGs. And I think that message has certainly comes back now in what I hear, what I get back from the different member states, is really that this getting out of your comfort zone of research is crucial in this area to really get to impact.
Thank you, Luc. There was a question from the audience, and it's a question that we regularly hear. There is impatience for these partnerships to deliver results, yes, because there is urgency in transforming our economy or society. How do we make sure that the partnerships contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals? How do we do that?
I think the question which also was made by one of the people in the audience here, Jean-Paul, is I think it might be time to really say that, you know, we fund, support research at the European level for a purpose. That we say it's the 3% with a purpose. We don't want the number, the size of the R&D budgets in member states or at the European Commission level to be increased, but we want it for a purpose. And I think then, of course, the point which was made by the person, Jean-Paul, I only got your first name.
Moati, Jean-Paul Moati.
Jean-Paul Moati is an extremely well-made point. And I think one of the issues here also listed on the Twitter accounts is, do we still have as purpose competitiveness? I think this is a pretty central issue. If the competitiveness might not involve sustainability, then I think we can really raise the question whether competitiveness in terms of reducing whatever labor costs of companies or other organizations is still the purpose of our research funding and research activities. I think we should be straightforward and argue that maybe sustainability, long-term sustainability, should be the purpose. How you then carry it out in terms of the different fields is up to the researchers, it's up to the partnerships, it's possibly up to missions, the Green Deal, various other features. But, and if I make a critique even on the way we find now the new Commission, is digitalization a purpose? The impact it might have on sustainable development, on inclusiveness, on pulling in more transparent decision-making, evidence-based policy, as we heard this morning in the session here, then I think digitalization has a purpose. But to say just that we want to move in a digital society for the sake of no longer seeing each other and being at a digital distance with our friends on the other side of the web, I don't think is a purpose. So in this sense, I think it's really time to start to put back the core reason of why research is being carried out, is to understand better knowledge, but at the same time, at this moment, clearly with the purpose of the sustainability of this planet.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Luc Soete at work, giving us inconvenient truths. Fortunately, I'm not here this afternoon to defend the Commission's policy. Don't run away, Luc, I still have two questions for you. Impact. What do we do to make sure that there is impact? The panel members all said it. It is more than just funding research and technological development. How do we make sure that we have the impact that goes to this systemic transformation?
Well, I think there was one question which asked the role of social sciences and humanities. And I think social science and humanities should really play a central role in terms of highlighting the way impact could be achieved. And I think one of the issues here is really that the behavioral parts, I mean, again, in the examples you gave, become very straightforward. We have health issues, but many of these health issues are also related to particular behavioral features, which could be corrected. So in all these areas, impact and the whole behavioral sciences, the social sciences more generally, the humanities, etc., have to play a much more fundamental role in highlighting how particular research areas can indeed lead to much more impact than we have it now. That also involves the communication part, the comment made in terms of the communication of the research activities, and particularly in the direction of academics, as you rightly put.
Okay. Is there no contradiction between impact and openness? If we want impact, but at the same time we want to open the partnerships to social sciences, humanities, to many other companies, actors, stakeholders, civil society, will these partnerships be able to deliver? What about the governance? And that was actually one of the questions coming through Slido. How do we reconcile impact and openness?
Yeah. It's the most popular question. I think that the big danger of setting a direction, giving a particular purpose, even in the case of sustainability, is that we go in a direction whereby the disruption which might occur in terms of other groups coming up with different views, etc., are not being heard. And I think this is the danger typically in partnerships, that partnerships are closed shops, are basically there to agree amongst each other that this is the direction we should go, and that possibly another alternative direction coming from a complete different scientific field could actually be much more promising. I think to this extent, missions, innovation are exactly oxymorons with respect to the disruptive nature which is behind it. We cannot give really a direction in a particular research field to lead to a particular impact. It could well be that it comes out from a completely different area. So I would always sort of make a plea that in each of the partnerships there is a kind of open window somewhere to allow challenges. And that you say, I do have really people who work in a very, very different field, but who address also this issue, which I incorporate in my area. Just to allow this change, that is that if indeed there is a disruption, one would take notice of it. Now, it increases even the problem of governance, I fully agree. But I think on governance, maybe in this partnership, we could also be, as you do at the Commission at the moment, be much more involving partners from member states, partners from regions. If you think of the mission on the cities, it's sure that the partnerships and the governance might well be a few cities which are best practice examples, which could take over the lead, the governance of the full partnership in this particular area of sustainability and cities. So let's be very flexible and open on what governance would be optimal in each of these partners. I believe that there could be quite variety in different governance models, and that the art will be to experiment to see how governance could lead us more quickly to particular impacts with respect to these partnerships.
Thank you, Luc. Let's maybe turn to the audience. Luc is always eager to challenge us. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to challenge Luc on what he said?
Here's a hand.
There's over there.
Thank you for this interesting discussion. I'm a little bit surprised, actually, that in EU 13 countries, where I come from, University of Tartu, Estonia, we actually don't know much about the partnership for us. There are not too many partnerships on the landscape because our stakeholders are not involved in too many. And I was thinking about that in Horizon Europe, we talk about widening participation and involving all the stakeholders. But in the partnerships, now they are changing again, and we have a renewed challenge of informing the stakeholders in all countries. So as the political goal of Horizon Europe is to be more open and inclusive, the partnerships should also serve the 26% of the societies in those countries.
Thank you. Anyone else? A last call? Yes, please.
Yeah, hi. Yes. One thought, I mean, we are in a more global society. Challenges are definitely global as well. And then I've seen, in the in the philanthropy sessions, actually, we've been interacting with foundations coming from abroad, but I don't see partnerships or even with openness to the world was one of the Moedas policies. I'm thinking on partnerships with global actors or with actors from abroad. So we tend to look at always to Europe as Europeans, and then I think partnerships can be crucial if we want to play again a global role. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll come to the issue of foundations in a minute because we have a surprise guest on that. But look, inclusiveness, how do we make sure that everyone is involved across Europe and not just a few in Europe? And at the same time, how do we open up to the rest of the world? Because SDGs are global.
I think that the partnership, to come back to your question, partnership is still dominated by this excellence as a general rule across research. And I think the more we move away from the idea that we have ERC, of course, which is a relatively easy allocation system based on excellence, we can move much more in terms of Pillar 2 and Pillar 3 with respect to partnerships and highlight that if you really want to have an impact, then indeed it is essential that you are as inclusive geographically as possible. It is, to come back to IMA, you will want to make sure that in Romania or in Bulgaria, etc., your impact, etc., is also introduced, and that it is not just limited to the Scandinavian and Nordic countries. So I think in these partnerships, the inclusiveness geographically of the whole of Europe should become an essential feature which has to be taken into account in whatever KPI. In your case in Estonia, why there is so little participation, I think is an interesting question to put back to the Estonian authorities, because as a small country, it should be involved exactly in much more partnerships, given the fact of its size, of its research part. So I would say the dominance of the large countries in partnerships is actually a wrong signal, because they can do it within their own country. The partnerships at European level should precisely be dominated by small countries who need, by definition, practically the outside world. And to come to your point about the outside world, well, the first of your 44 list partners, the first is EU-Africa. So I think this is where indeed the breaking open and looking in partnerships to the outside world beyond the EU 25 and possibly the associated member countries, but take into account, for instance, Africa in that case as the one listed number one in the health list of the 44, and you can look up the document. It shows the way in which indeed partnerships should further develop in a much more open global sense, following, of course, the SDG as the overall framework, as Jean-Éric Paquet mentioned it just a minute ago.
Luc, thank you very much. Thank you. And I invite back Daria on stage so that we together welcome our last guest to this session.
Yes,
Daria.
We have a very special guest, and I think that you will introduce him. I wish I would have had the chance to ask an exciting question, so I'll come back to that. But what we've heard actually is that we need the partnerships to be drivers of the vision necessary for the transformation. It needs to be co-created. It needs to be co-created with a multidisciplinary approach, because otherwise we cannot identify or understand the different levers needed to actually have implementation at scale, is what I believe that we've heard. But there was also a perspective that I think was maybe not highlighted enough, and we'll have reason to come back to that maybe, and that is that once you have done that, the actual process, as you said, Luc, the solutions might come from a completely different angle. So these partnerships must be agile also, open to responding to the changes along the way. So it would have been great to just hear, will that require any changes in the rules for the partnerships? Possibly, but I could turn to you as well. What do you think about that?
Let's look at that. There is still a lot possible in the implementation of the framework program of Horizon Europe. And that is actually why we're doing these R&I days and the consultation on the strategic plan and on the implementation strategy. There are colleagues here, Marina Zanki and many others, who work on the implementation, the rules, the conditions, etc. So these are indeed issues we have to look at all together.
But now one of the core principles of the partnerships is to include more partners, as we've heard, also from all over the world. And I think that is the perfect cue to our very special guest. So Kurt, you will now introduce, I think.
With pleasure, Daria. Commissioner Moedas attached a lot of importance to opening up everything we do, and especially partnerships, to the role of foundations. And so one of the design features of the partnerships is that it is not supposed anymore just to work with the private sector or just to work with member states, but really to involve all the partners, all the actors that can contribute to a certain impact and that can commit to work together to achieving that impact. And I'm very pleased to be able to welcome Jeremy Farrar, Director from the Wellcome Trust. Please, Jeremy, join us. And you have kindly accepted, Jeremy, to give us your perspective on the role of foundations in the light of everything you have heard here. We have not invited you to promote the Wellcome Trust, but to really tell from a foundation how do you see these partnerships and how do you think foundations should be involved and committed to these partnerships?
So thank you very much. I've thrown out everything I was going to say at the start, having listened to that discussion, so this is off the top of my head. But firstly, just to say, as you'll guess from my accent, I'm particularly proud and honoured to be here as a European. And just to remind everybody that, and I'm not going to promote Wellcome, but Wellcome was set up by an American. We are in London by an accident of history, and we have just opened an office in Berlin. So we are a European foundation, and I hope we are also a global foundation, to the comment about global outreach. I also think it's really important, and this reflects a little bit the events of the last few years, to make sure that we celebrate success. Because I think some of the events of the last few years have come about because we've accepted a cynical approach to the world, which has led to fragmentation and polarization. And just occasionally, I think you have to stand back and say, whilst it isn't perfect, and we will make it better in the future, actually, there's been enormous progress. And I hate to single out a single individual, but I think if anybody hasn't looked at this document, I think Carlos Moedas deserves enormous thanks from all of us for being a flexible commissioner, for looking to the future, not the past, and for adapting the commission as he went along and listening to a diverse set of voices. And although he's not in the room, I think we should just celebrate his role and wish him the very best in his next phase. And in that, I think there is also something critically important, and that is to offer hope and inspire. We can describe the problems for a very long time, and I came from an academic community, and academics are brilliant at describing problems. I think our role is to describe the problem and then come up with innovative solutions. And I think that's what the future of Horizon Europe is all about. Foundations are diverse, and I cannot possibly represent the voices of all foundations. So if there are foundations in the audience, as there are, global foundations, please excuse me if I don't necessarily represent the 1,000 people that we've spoken with, an organisation, civil society and foundations. And I hope what I say is representative of us all. They're very diverse. They're very diverse in scale, in geography, in interests, in history, and everything else. But they do share a lot of common values and overlapping interests. And they also share a very, very strong sense, focused on their communities and the global world, the global situation, that they want to make the world a better place. And I think sometimes when we talk about partnerships, and it's unusual for a British person to talk about romance, but romance and partnerships are sort of similar. They're always bumpy. They're always difficult. You'll have arguments as you go along, but I think as long as you remember the vision and the mission and the ideals that you started out with, you can go back and find solutions to the little bumps that come along. And don't get distorted by the fact that sometimes there are irritants in those partnerships. Because you can sort them out, and if you're flexible enough, you can do. And there is no doubt, as we've heard, that the world does face some enormous challenges at the moment. Climate change, epidemics and drug resistance, the coming of non-communicable diseases, a multitude of other problems beyond the health sector. But we're also at a stage when science, and I don't mean biomedical science, I mean broad science, social science, the humanities, biomedical, technological sciences, has undoubtedly got a role to play in finding some of the solutions. We phrase that as science, innovation, and society, and we believe that unless you bring those three things together, all of them, with equal respect, you will not leads to the greatest benefits to the greatest number of people that the endeavour can bring. And so those for us are the three pillars that drive success and innovation and the thing that the foundations stand for, which is to make the world a better place. But that will only happen if we learn, and we learn within the foundations, because foundations have as big an ego as everybody else. We will only learn this if we learn that whatever challenge we face, we cannot address this on our own. And we do sometimes have to take off the ego that we all bring to the discussions and say, what is the bigger vision and what are we trying to achieve? And foundations do not have the scale to do that. Governments do not necessarily have sometimes the wit or the innovation or the willingness to take risks, and the Commission sometimes doesn't have that either. But if you bring those all together, then I think you can really address the challenges. And it was not my idea, but yesterday the phrase, the 4 Ps came up: public, private, philanthropic, partnerships. And putting those together brings not just the public sector, not just the private sector, but it also brings, in my view, society and the philanthropic sector to bear on the challenges we face. Over the last few years, we've worked closely with the Commission. As I say, I think Modas has been an incredible partner in this. We've worked on Ebola, we've worked on drug resistance, we've worked on research culture so that we redefine how research culture leads to better innovations. And in all of those discussions, although there have been minor hiccups along the way, we've never lost sight of the fact of why we went into that original partnership. And foundations can and should be, their reason for existence is their independence. But they shouldn't put independence at the damage of impact. They should be edgy. They should be willing to take risks. They should be willing to go to places that governments and commissions cannot go. But in doing so, do that in the partnership model that we've described. I believe that the greatest threats to all this in the modern world are fragmentation and polarization. And if the European Commission and its partners have one thing at their heart, it is, in my view, the standing up for the values of multilateralism, putting the Sdgs at the forefront of all its thinking, and stand for those values which have held Europe together for decades now, and which is what binds us together. As the world gets torn apart and gets into a more complex geopolitical world, Europe's role is to stand up for the social contract, that social license to operate, and to put sustainability at the heart of everything we do. And if you do that at the Commission, you will have very, very strong partners amongst the foundations. We should stretch ourselves. Every good romantic or other partnership stretches itself. It doesn't do it together and then come into the lowest common denominator. It pushes each other with its strengths of flexibility and independence and scale and governance to go further than each one would go on their own. Partnerships are not about finding the lowest common denominator. They're about lifting you both out of where you would be into something you may not dare go to on your own. That's what, in my view, a partnership is. And what we would like to see coming out of this week, and I say we're delighted to be here, is to see now those warm words turned into concrete actions. What does that actually mean in terms of commitments which you're willing to be held accountable and responsible for? It's climate change, it's sustainability, it's the European-Africa partnership, it's putting governance, yes, right, but not letting governance get in the way of innovation. And it's ensuring that we bring science, innovation, and society together. And we make sure that society is part of that debate, is communicated with, and shares the inspiration that I think we all want to bring. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Daria, any questions? Or shall we ask if there are questions from the floor?
After listening to this, I'm just, we should open up. So if anybody has a question for Jeremy, I think you should be first. And in the meantime, I'm reflecting on how much you emphasize that we're in this together. I have to also say thanks, not maybe to you, but to foundations in general. We know that foundations have played a really crucial part in establishing sustainability research, and I just know that we have so much more to do now that when we really, in a serious way, have to integrate all of that knowledge into everything that we do. So my question to you would be, if nobody else raises their hand immediately, you sound very inspirational and optimistic. What are your main reasons for optimism at this point? What are you looking at that you think is the things that give the most hope?
if you take any rational look over the last, of my lifetime, so I'm not going to tell you how long that is, but it's, it's reasonably long. The progress of humanity, yes, I do not underestimate the challenges we are creating and have created. Please don't say that. But over the last 4 or 5 decades, the progress at humanity level has been truly phenomenal. There has been costs to it, but we shouldn't underestimate the changes just in my lifetime in terms of things at a global scale. It's that we have to build on, learn the lessons of what we've done wrong and the pressure we're putting on the planet in order to drive that, and redefine where that goes in the future. But if you don't have optimism, if you don't have inspiration, you'll get sucked into a cynical, pessimistic world that says we can't make progress. And in my view, that is at least in part driving the political polarization that we're seeing at the moment by speaking to those fears, sometimes rational, sometimes irrational, which is dividing our societies. And I think we have to stand up and argue against that and offer a realistic chance that if we come together, we can make the world a better place.
Still a chance here. And I also reflect on the fact that you're talking about the fact that it creates discomfort to work together from different perspectives is not a reason to become cynical. And I think that's a very important message. And a wise person told me yesterday, actually remember that all learning happens and innovation happens at the optimal discomfort level. So that's what we should all, I think, strive to. But then I can't help but, since you talk about that with I believe, deep experience, when that discomfort happens, in the rooms we're in, when we're meeting, you know, the person from the other side of the other research field or the policy side, or what do you think are usually the things you can do as a leader in that situation to create this actual collaboration, to not fall down into that cynical?
One of the best things a mentor, this was when I was a young doctor in Edinburgh many years ago, taught me was that the most innovative, interesting places to work are at the interface between disciplines who don't work usually together. It's where real creativity happens. And to do that, we need to make sure that through our education systems, our training programs, and in our own work, we value and respect that diversity. Because I do have a worry that across Europe and around the world, we're sending young people into ever more closer silos, where there is a disconnect between those, and I think the best, most creative minds and the best ideas that will actually transform the world will be at the interfaces between disciplines, where there is mutual respect and mutual understanding of what they can and cannot bring to the party.
Thank you for that. So that would be, here is another question.
Hi. Yeah, it's related actually. Jeremy, thank you very much for that. And I really liked your point about partnerships, because I often advise people that if they're not irritated sometimes by their partners, they probably have the wrong partners. So you've reinforced that. And in that light, I wanted to ask you, I mean, as an organisation with a long UK history, how do you feel working at the European level has changed Welcome? You know, that prized independence. What have you allowed to change, and what has the impact been on you, and how do you see that developing with the new Berlin office? I'm particularly interested in Africa and global partnerships, by the way.
So it's a shame Carlos is not here, because I think we've changed. It was an uncomfortable early discussions, but you have to come back, as I said, and see what are you really here for, and is it worth going through that discomfort for? You know, a lot of it was myth, a lot of it was misunderstanding, a lot of it was a sense of what somebody is before you actually engage. You know, first impressions or gossip and rumour, both from the Commission side and our side, obviously led people into a direction which actually wasn't true. So I think what we learned is actually, and I would say this even without Commission members here, that the quality of people within the Commission is extraordinarily high. The quality of the thinking that's going on is extraordinarily high. And it's, you know, you don't hear that often enough, I think. I think we should celebrate that, and we've certainly learned a huge amount from them. I also think what we learned is the Commission, and I believe it's been mostly legal, have found ways around things in ways that I never thought they would previously do. And I hope it was legal for their sakes. But they were much, much more flexible, in fact, in many ways more flexible than we were, in finding solutions to problems when we both wanted to go somewhere. And then, of course, in June of a few years ago, a big event happened, you may have noticed, and that made us realize that given our history and given what we wanted to achieve in the world, we could not stand for being a small country foundation.
Daria, I just got a message from a colleague who sent this message before Jeremy's last intervention, a colleague who is following from the office and says, Jeremy's intervention is the speech of the last 2.5 days. And this was before you mentioned all the good things about the Commission, which of course is reassuring to us. But thank you for this.
This is my brother.
It's a Frenchman, actually, who is complimenting an Englishman. And that it means a lot to us.
Be well paid. Be well paid.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Daria.
So, yes, it has been a privilege to be part of this session, to listen to a lot of the insights. It's very clear, I think, from this discussion that we agree that we're in this together. There is no way that we can solve the challenges that we have or even drive innovation in a meaningful way without working together. Yes, it will involve an optimal level of discomfort. It will require a lot of humility for other perspectives, but we see a lot of leaders here who are already doing just that. We understand that the partnerships will be key to actually describing the visions of where we should go. It's not about technology, it's not just about the research and innovation part, but rather it's a vision of where we want to go that will need to be agile, that will need to include multiple stakeholders that can help us experiment in a way that unravels the challenges for implementation. Because if it's the one thing that we really need from the partnerships this time, it's implementation at scale of the stuff that really works. All the nice, fantastic, valuable research and innovation that comes from these partnerships must be implemented. And that says a lot about the role for different stakeholders in this. So I've been inspired to listen to you all describe this, and I'm looking forward to the co-creation of what was almost happening in the end, like the qualities in the process then, when we need to have, when the vision is there. So that's what I take away from this. Looking forward for the continuous journey. Thank you so much.
And thanks to you.
And I'll leave it to Kurt. Say a last thing.
Thank you, Daria. I enjoyed our ballet. We didn't rehearse. It was a bit uncomfortable at times, but I hope you enjoyed this session. Like Daria, I learned a lot. My Commission colleagues have listened to you, have learned a lot as well. They be here in the room or be they in the office. I think we have moved on partnerships. The question is not anymore whether we should have partnerships or not. The question is how can we get more from these partnerships? And partnerships are not about doing things together. Partnerships are about achieving things together that we could not do without a partnership. The challenges are daunting. The opportunities are massive. The actors are manifold. But we need these partnerships if we really want to make a difference in going towards this systemic transformation that we need for our future, for the future of Europe, for the future of our children and grandchildren. And I, from the European Commission, together with my colleagues, I feel really encouraged that we can go in this way with your support, with your cooperation. Yes, we will stretch the partners, as we have heard. Yes, we will be demanding. But if we know what the vision is, if we know what we want to achieve, what impact we want to have, I'm sure we can do it together. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here this afternoon. And please stay for the last closing session. I would also like to thank my colleagues who have organized this session, Maria Reinfeldt in particular, but many others, Jörg, and etc. Thank you very much.